Thank you for reading the text. I had cataract surgery 2 weeks ago, and it's going very well, but it's too early to get new glasses, so I'm seeing double. And not seeing small print, as in here. If the sermon seems unduly long, it's because I'm seeing double. But then again, it's so nice to see so many of you here this morning. Seeking sanctuary. Sanctuary is not always where we expect to find it. So when the rains fell a couple of weeks ago and the waters rose, our daughter and her husband, 2 college-age students, their children, a house guest from Boston, and their dog escaped the flood by walking through chest-deep water up the hill of Trinity Street up to the police station at the Line Gates roundabout. Sanctuary at the police station. Safety, reassurance. It's not always where you expect to find it. But on that morning at 4:30, they found it there. There are occasions when we need to find space and time just to breathe again. And when Jesus talks to this crowds of thousands so large that they're trampling each other, writes Luke, he says, "Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, yet God feeds them. Consider the lilies, know that they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these." That's Luke's version of what is more familiar to us of Matthew, talking about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. Seek sanctuary, he says, where you can let go of anxiety and begin to breathe again. Wendell Berry is a wonderful poet and author who's living an intentional life on a farm in Kentucky. And this is his poem called "The Peace of Wild Things." When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be, I go and lie down where the wood duck rests, in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Sanctuary. I come into the peace of wild things, the ravens and the lilies. Now for us that might be just going on over to the lagoon in Forest Park, or the Japanese garden at the Botanical Garden, or our own back porch, or the coffee shop across the street, or right here in this sanctuary. We call this a sanctuary because it's a place where we can get away from it all so that we can get back into it all. And the stained glass windows, the vaulted ceiling, the music that is played, being surrounded by one another, words spoken that we seldom hear elsewhere in the world. And then online, we can enter the sanctuary by converting our dining room table or our desk or our lounge chair into a sanctuary of its own. Seeking sanctuary. a place to be free, says Wendell Berry, that he finds beside the pond in the woods. Now, sometimes seeking sanctuary is more dramatic than that. Go to the cathedral in Durham, in northeast England, over there. Find the north door, and there you will see the famous sanctuary knocker of the 1500s. It's in the shape of a lion's head with a handle hanging down from its mouth. And in the old days, if you had committed a great offense, if you could run and reach that door knocker before the sheriff and his posse could run and reach you, the monks of the cathedral would hear the rapping and they were obligated to let you in. You'd be given a black robe to wear with St. Cuthbert's cross sewn on the left shoulder to indicate that you have been granted sanctuary by God and the saints of the cathedral. And you'd be given a bed and food and 37 days to reconcile with whomever you offended, or 37 days to make a plan for escape. So, sanctuary as a place to be free and safe in order to imagine what's next. Now, this church could become the Durham Cathedral of the neighborhood. Perhaps you saw at the 225th General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA this summer that by a vote of 340 yes and 25 no, you can declare yourself a sanctuary church, a way of working with immigrants for justice in the United States. Years ago, my dad died 10 months after my mom died. And it was as if my North Star had fallen out of the sky. They were always there to give me direction. But now the clouds of my parents' death had covered up the star. And at the time, I was the minister of a church in a suburb just north of Chicago along the shore of Lake Michigan, a stable parish with lots of good people who told me how sorry they were for my loss. Yet life went on in the church, and we were moving toward Holy Week and Easter, and there was work to be done. But during that time of approaching Easter, I was approaching greater despair, as Wendell Berry would put it. Despair for the world. I wasn't doing very well. Then I got a phone call from a hospice nurse at the hospital. I never met her, but she gave me advice in a single sentence that made all the difference in the world. She said, "No one will give you time to mourn. Take it anyway." So where did I go to find sanctuary that I so desperately needed at the time? Well, I went along the shore of the lake. And I found a place where I could sit in the sand that was just over a short ledge that had been formed by the waves of years past. And I could sit there far away from others, alone, and I would not hear the traffic behind me on Sheridan Road. And what did I think about? I don't know, everything, nothing. I don't remember, except I still can hear the waves. Coming in, going out, in and out. And what I discovered was after a few minutes, I was breathing with the waves. In and out, in and out. The rhythm of God's grace when you don't know where else to go. So seeking sanctuary along the lakefront. And eventually the clouds separated, the North Star reappeared, looking quite a bit different than I had before, but I had direction again. But this wasn't all that idyllic, because there were people in the congregation who were impatient with me. Come on, Phil, we know your parents died, but get over it. It's time to get on with things. We have to get our summer worship schedule planned. We have to adjust our budget. We have to get the organ fixed again. So the beach, the waves, breathing out, breathing in, sanctuary. Now, you can't live forever in Durham Cathedral, and you can't spend every day sitting on the beach. But for a moment, it's a place to seek sanctuary. Now, if that's all that Jesus was telling this crowd, then we could just all go over to Forest Park now and rent paddle boats for the afternoon. But Jesus concludes with a very powerful command, a radical demand, radical, getting to the root of things. He said, don't be afraid. God will give you all that you need. Sell your possessions and give alms to those in need. Your treasure is safe with God, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there is your heart as well. That's hard for people to hear who have been dragging things out of their basements and putting them on the front yards to be thrown into a dumpster and carted away. It's hard to discern at that moment what's really of value, especially in our culture where we worship things. I mean, what makes us rich? In our time and place, it's what we have. Now, we can't blame all of this on Milton Friedman, the economist from the University of Chicago, who was the darling of the capitalist world in 1960s and 1970s. But he made it plain in an article in the New York Times, September 13th, 1970. He wrote, "There's one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, as long as it stays within the rules of the game. The primary goal in life is to increase the profits of the investors, no matter what social impact it has on others." Now, his economic philosophy has been the sacred text for our American culture for the last half a century. And it's in that context that the gospel cries back to him, "You fool. Where your treasure is where your heart is also." Actually, Jesus didn't say, "You fool," to the crowd. He was quoting God in a parable that he had told just before what we had read from the Gospel of Luke. Before Jesus talked about the ravens and the lilies, he told the people about a story of a man who is experiencing a bumper crop. He said, "What do I do? My barn is not big enough to store this new harvest. But what I'll do is I'll tear down my barn and I'll build a much bigger one. And then I'll be able to say to myself, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.'" It's at this point in the parable that God says, "You fool. This very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" So we end where we started. Where do we seek sanctuary? If not in our profits and in our possessions, then where? Now's the time for us to find these places where the ravens lead us, where the lilies surround us, where the wild things reveal a place of inner quietness, where we discover what is of real value. The call for us to go and seek. Amen.